Mr. Dark whispers.
You think you know fear? You think you've seen the worst? But what if the very ground beneath your feet, the air you breathe, the nature you've always seen as beautiful, turned against you? What if it wasn't just around you, but inside you? This isn't a story about a monster under the bed. It's a story about the monster that grew from within, and how I fought, with every fiber of my being, to reclaim a piece of myself, even if it meant setting the world on fire. If you've ever felt utterly powerless, watching something precious slip away, and wished you could just fight back against the inevitable, hit that like button, subscribe, and prepare yourself. Because this story, my story, is about finding a way to rage against the dying light, no matter how futile it might seem. It started with a leaf, a single, insignificant maple leaf. My wife Anya and I stood over our son Luke in the soft glow of our living room lamp, turning his head gently. The light caught it, a tiny, vibrant green sapling leaf. Half of it was tucked right under his eyelid, nestled there as if it belonged. How it got there, we had no idea. Our yard was full of maple trees, the neighborhood lined with them, but a leaf working its way so deeply into a child's eye by accident? It seemed impossible. We considered the alternative, the ridiculous notion that Luke, our quiet, serious 8-year-old, had somehow put it there himself. But Luke wasn't that kind of kid. He was the kind you called an old soul, thoughtful and methodical. Even now, as we debated over him, he stood there, patient and uncomplaining, his small hand resting trustingly in mine. What if it scratches his eye? I heard my own voice, sharp with an unfamiliar dread. He'll go blind. Anya, ever the pragmatist, scoffed gently. Don't say that, Alex. It's just at the edge. We can just pull it. She reached for him, her fingers hovering, ready to pluck it out like a stray eyelash. But an icy wave of revulsion washed over me. I couldn't explain it, this visceral aversion to her skin, touching that leaf. It was a gut feeling, pure instinct, and throughout my life, I've learned to trust those hunches. They've never led me wrong. Tweezers, I said, the word a sudden, urgent command. I'll get them, that'll do it. I practically sprinted to the bathroom, driven by an unshakable certainty that Anya, in her stubborn determination, would try to remove it the moment my back was turned. Our marriage, a strange alchemy of opposing wills, often revolved around who was right. That we'd managed to raise Luke together was, frankly, a miracle. When I returned, tweezers in hand, Anya reached for them. I've got this. No, I cut her off, my voice firmer than I intended. I have the steadier grip. She opened her mouth to argue, a familiar retort forming on her lips. But then Luke's voice, calm and clear, sliced through the tension. I want Dad to do it. Words weren't a plea or a whine. They were a statement, devoid of the hysterics you'd expect from a child in pain or fear. And that's when it hit me, a chill deeper than any dread. I wanted to step back, to turn and flee the room. Only later did I understand why. It was the weary resignation in his voice, the quiet acceptance of someone facing their final moments. With a hand that trembled despite my resolve, I held the tweezers, my other hand cupping the back of Luke's head, tilting him gently towards the light. I took hold of the very tip of the maple leaf, the smallest sliver, and began to pull. Slowly, agonizingly, it emerged, damp and furled, glistening with the residue of tears. But it didn't stop. My breath hitched. Attached to the leaf was a thin, delicate twig, and on that twig more vegetation dripping with moisture. Some of it, I saw with a dawning horror, was blood. Anya shrieked, a raw, primal sound that tore through the quiet room. But I couldn't stop pulling. A numb fascination had taken hold, a grotesque curiosity as lengths and lengths of that delicate branch, adorned with tiny, perfect leaves, reeled out from inside my son's head. Luke, he just stood there. No protest, no cry of pain, no visible fear, just placid, unwavering trust in me, as I continued to extract the impossible from within him. My mind reeled, trying to grasp how this could be. I imagined him, with a sudden acute disgust, snapping off a young branch in the park and feeding it through his eye, with a tranquil, horrifying concentration. But even then, a colder, more terrifying understanding began to solidify. It wasn't an accident. Seed, or spore, had found its way in, and in the nutrient-rich warmth of his eye socket, it had begun to grow. I was vaguely aware of Anya moving frantically behind me, her cries muffled by the rushing in my ears. I was hypnotized by the continuous strand of leaves, the endless unraveling of this horror. Then she was there, leaning over my shoulder, a pair of scissors glinting in her hand. With a desperate, decisive snip, she cut the twig as close to Luke's eye as she dared.
Ash!
It fell onto the carpet with a soft, wet thud. I recoiled, appalled, not wanting even my clothes to brush against the severed abomination. "Luke," I choked out, my voice thick with a terror that clawed at my throat. "Are you okay?" He blinked with a strange, unnatural difficulty. The raw, cut stub of the twig caught on his upper eyelid. "I'm okay," he said, his voice still calm, detached. "I can't really feel it. It's not that much anyway." I wished he'd scream. I wished he'd cry. Anything that would be normal. But he was silent. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, all the way to the hospital. Luke remained unnervingly quiet through the endless scans and tests. Anya clung to his hand, her knuckles white, as if afraid he'd simply evaporate if she'd let go. Each time they were separated, even for a moment, she paced the waiting room like a caged animal until I had to physically take her by the shoulders and force her into one of those unforgiving plastic chairs. Her eyes, usually so sharp and lively, were hollowed out, staring into nothing. Finally, we were ushered into a private room, the air thick with an unspoken weight. Dr. Rillard, his face an unreadable mask, kept glancing at Luke, who sat in a corner, oblivious, drawing with a crayon and notepad someone had given him. The doctor's gaze was unsettling, and I immediately suspected he was hiding something far beyond a mere prognosis. "So?" Anya demanded, her voice brittle. "The x-rays, the MRI, whatever else you've been doing? What's wrong with Luke?" Dr. Rillard gathered us to a nearby wall, gesturing to a set of images pinned there. He spoke in a hushed, almost conspiratorial undertone. "You wanted to know how far the plant you found has grown inside him. You thought he'd gotten a seed caught in his eye, and that this all started there? Well, didn't it?" Snapped a tremor in my voice. "What do you mean?" But the answer was already screaming at me from the images on the wall. Luke's scans, streaks of bone amidst the gray pads of muscle and organs. And through it all, like the intricate structure of a web, the stark white shapes of countless twigs and leaves, they were prolific. Their spread so profound that it was impossible to tell where they'd begun. The roots, if they were roots, were indistinguishable from the rest of the monstrous mass. I'd seen houses like this, choked by ivy, brickwork crumbling under its relentless embrace. Looking at the images of my son's body, I understood. This was what was happening. It had been happening for far longer than we knew. "There's nothing you can do," I whispered, my voice raw, harsh. "No extraction? Surgery?" Dr. Rillard shook his head, a gesture of grim finality. "There's no possibility of him surviving the removal. You can see how the plant has grown through his lungs. Into his heart, there's already extensive damage. If we even begin to try, it'll only get worse." Anya ripped one of the pictures from the wall, crumpling it in her clenched fist. Her knuckles were white. "So you're telling us," she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous growl, "that you won't do anything? You'll just let him die?" Dr. Rillard sighed, peering at Luke again, who continued to doodle, seemingly oblivious, or perhaps just uncaring. "I'm saying it's terminal, yes. We can look at options for palliative care today, or make another appointment. While I can't discuss other patients, surgery has been tried before in other cases. The survival rate is low, lower than low." My head snapped up. "Other people? What are you talking about? This is rare. Surely," I looked it up. "Supposed to be impossible." He coughed, shuffling documents, clearly signaling the end of our meeting. "As I said, I can't discuss other patients." Anya's hand shot out, blocking his path to the door. "Stop," she commanded, her voice surprisingly steady. "You know something. What caused it? How did it happen?" Dr. Rillard's eyes darted around the room, agitated. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Maxwell, but I really don't." Then Luke spoke. Clear, decisive. "I want to go home now." We all froze, looking at him in amazed silence, as if commanded by some higher authority. "It doesn't hurt or anything. It's really okay if we go." He crossed the room and took his mother's hand. something he hadn't done in years. Anya softened, and I saw her glance up, fighting back tears. "Okay, baby," she murmured, her voice trembling. "We'll go home." I lingered, my gaze locked on Dr. Rillard. He took a nervous step back. "Is that like the others too?" I snapped once Anya and Luke were out of earshot. "The way Luke's acting, like all this is normal and absolutely fine?" Something in the doctor's professional facade broke. He shook his head slowly. "No, they're not all like that. Some of them get angry. And between you and me, that's a whole lot worse." In that moment, I hated him. Hated him with all the impotent rage I couldn't direct at the thing that was consuming my son. "Yeah," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You're right. What's the point if there's nothing you can do?" We walked across the hospital parking lot, Anya and I holding Luke's hands, just as we used to before he declared himself too old. He looked at everything with the same easy interest. Birds in the sky, cars of unique colors, stones on the ground, completely unaffected by the twig that was already beginning to extend from his eye again. I wondered why it didn't hurt. How could a living thing grow through flesh and bone, feeding on a child, without causing agony? Perhaps, I thought with a grim realization, the plant released some hormone to make its host more agreeable. I'd been thinking of it as a disease, infectious, an invading sickness. An impulse seized me, a desperate need to ask Luke. Why wasn't he scared? Why didn't he understand what was happening? But he seemed so small, so innocent. My grief tore me into pieces, and I couldn't bring myself to voice the questions. I just walked, nodding at his innocent comments, pretending it didn't kill me to hold myself together. Then, a man approached from our right, stumbling, weaving, homeless I thought at first, or drunk. I felt a pang of pity for him, struggling across the hot tarmac, likely with nowhere to go. But as he drew closer, swiveling his head in our direction, I saw them. Rose thorns, growing out of every facial orifice. Petals, dark as dried blood, dripping free. He wasn't stumbling from intoxication. He was blind, abandoned in that parking lot by terrified friends or family, with no idea what else to do. Anya gave a little scream of shock, but Luke only stood still, watching the stranger with an unnerving lack of fear or horror. "Sir," I said, stepping forward, trying to inject some semblance of normalcy into this impossible scene. "Sir, let me help you." He jumped slightly at my voice, still able to hear at least. He shuffled nearer, and the doctor's words echoed in my mind. "Some of them get angry." Cold dread snaked its way around my heart. "Sir," I repeated, this time with more caution, my hand hovering, ready to pull Luke and Anya away. "I just want to help. My son's like you. He has your condition." The man nodded, and as he opened his mouth to speak, I saw his tongue slit in two by the thorns. His words were a guttural gurgle, improperly formed, but the meaning was clear. "It'll happen to all of us," he rasped. "It's catching, somehow. Anyone that's close gets it too." "That's what they're saying out there." Anya tugged at Luke, pulling him towards the car, signing for me to follow. "Who's saying it?" I called out to the man, my voice tight. "And out where?" But he only bumbled hopelessly towards the hospital entrance, a tragic, thorny figure. I let him go, consumed by a terrible pity, knowing he would only be turned out onto the street to die. In the weeks that followed, we tried to keep Luke comfortable at home. It was simple enough. He'd sit watching cartoons or reading comic books, seemingly unconcerned by the growths we had to cut back from his face day by day. His placid acceptance was a constant, agonizing reminder of what was happening to him. One night, as Anya and I were putting him to bed, he looked up at me, his eyes innocent and knowing all at once. "When I'm a tree," he asked, "will you plant me outside in the yard so I can still be here with you?" I knelt beside him, my gaze carefully avoiding the maple leaf I could now see flattened against the inside of his mouth. "You're not going to be a tree, buddy," I said, my voice thick with a lie I desperately wanted to believe. "We're not going to let that happen, all right?" Luke looked at me, a profound sadness in his young eyes. "Dad." "Honey, come here a sec," Anya said, tugging at my arm, trying to pull me away from the impossible conversation. "I'm not going to let anything hurt you, Lukey," I insisted, my voice breaking. "I won't." Anya ushered me to the door, then leaned down to kiss Luke's forehead. "Night, baby," she whispered. "Don't worry about this anymore." Back downstairs, she punched my shoulder lightly, but with a sharp edge of frustration. Can't say things like that. Why not? I protested, my voice raw. I mean it. You know the doctor was right, Alex. You've seen how things are going. And even though we hide it, Luke sees it too. By then, the man in the parking lot's words had become horrifyingly clear. We'd become media addicts, glued to online platforms and televised news, dissecting every new theory, cycling through old ones in a compulsive, fascinated dread. It had begun in the countryside. Farmers, orchard workers, anyone in close contact with plants, especially trees. Their loved ones reported them coming home with injuries like Luke's leaves, thorns, even flower heads protruding from cuts or bodily orifices. Attempts to cut out the growths, to amputate infested limbs, had failed. The trees were stubborn, growing deeply, heartily in their flower beds of flesh. All of these early victims had died. Some, in the late stages, walked out to their fields, their groves, their gardens, and stood among the trees and flowers. They succumbed willingly, believing they weren't dying but becoming something else, something more. These bodies were taken by government agents for study, leading to outrage, till the phenomenon became so widespread that such measures were seen as grimly necessary. Others among the first of the wood, as those affected quickly became known, did not die quietly. They raged. Vandalizing the fields and groves they blamed for their condition, often immolating themselves, taking the invading life within them in a final defiant act. No one knew how the wood spread. Was it by touch? Were dormant spores activating in sympathy with those around them? Whatever the case, the initial infection zones were sealed off, the plants contained or discarded, but it wasn't enough. The phenomenon crept into villages, towns, and cities, places where plant life was scarce. Scientists debated, shared hypotheses on talk shows. Some believed plants had communicated chemically to attack humanity. Others thought it was a new, parasitic life form. One scientist, an outlier quickly shunned, claimed it was evolution. It always starts from within and grows outwards, she argued. The plants even resemble the person they came from in small ways. We shouldn't destroy these people, and that's what they are still, but honor what nature has decided they become. This provoked a fresh surge of violence. Anya held my hand as we watched crowds on our television screen set forests ablaze, some still partially human and screaming. Journalists accosted masked arsonists. We need trees for fuel, to build things, and most importantly, oxygen, one journalist pressed. Is burning them all the wisest course of action? A young man in a navy balaclava shrugged. It's them or us, isn't it? Well, it's both of us with this approach, the journalist countered, wiping sweat from his brow. But the young man was already wandering away, disinterested, into the smoke. As the weeks passed, another group emerged amidst the chaos. They claimed to have developed a chemical, injectable, ingestible, a bath, that could destroy the plant while leaving the host alive. Snake oil, many said. A dangerous drug. But people were dying anyway. Many turned to it. There were attempts to criminalize its sale, but with the wealthy retreating to bunkers and vigilantes burning the wood, there was no regulating anything anymore. Anya and I tried to maintain a semblance of ordinary routine. It was all that kept us stable, a flimsy barrier against the crushing weight of breakdown. We tried to shield Luke, switching off shows, locking our phones when he entered a room. But sometimes late at night, I'd slip downstairs to find him camped in front of the TV, watching the news, idly picking at the maple leaf that had begun its insidious march from his eye again. One morning, he wasn't in his bed. After a frantic search of the house, I admitted to Anya he was gone. Where would he go? Anya's voice fractured, each word a two-syllable sob. Where is he? But our gaze, a terrible, shared understanding, had already fallen on the back door, standing open to the yard. We went to it side by side, not wanting to see what 1,000 televised images had prepared us for. Anya let out a sound, not a scream. Something thicker, deeper, from her very gut. I staggered out into the yard, drawn by that morbid human need to be close to terrible things to prove they are real. Luke, or what Luke now was, knelt on the lawn, his small body held upright by the tree that had grown through his throat, his spine the stave allowing its progression towards the sun, his arms swung uselessly at his sides, and his eyes. I couldn't look at his eyes. I saw them without seeing, intentionally blurring my focus, a desperate defense. While Anya stood, Broken, crying against the back door, I walked with a dull sense of purpose to the shed. I emerged with thick gardening gloves and a spade. As I advanced on what was left of my son, Anya cried out, "What are you doing?" "Burying him," I said flatly, my voice devoid of emotion. "The funeral homes won't take him. Sooner or later the government will send people to pick him up for whatever they're doing with the bodies, or the vigilantes will come. This is better." I tightened my grip on the spade's handle, forcing myself to think of Luke's body as a doll. A scarecrow, some inanimate thing that only resembled something dead. "Alex," Anya pleaded, her voice raw. "Don't. Please, just leave him. Leave him. This is what he wanted." "It's what that thing wanted," I snapped, turning on her. "That thing, through his brain, wanted him to die out here. Don't you see that?" Anya watched me, silent tears streaming down her face, pleading. In the end, I didn't touch him. Not because of her, but because the thought of it sickened me to my core. Yeah, we left Luke there for weeks to slowly decompose. The tree spread its branches from him through the long afternoons, as it had longed to. I kept the blinds drawn on that side of the house, suspected our neighbors did the same. One day, I peeked out to see Anya standing by the maple tree, talking to it the way she used to talk to Luke, and I couldn't help but notice the way the leaves had grown over the skull looked like a face. A month later, Anya and I lay in bed, holding each other, weary with grief, with the suffocating uncertainty of everything. Neither of us spoke much. There was nothing left to say. Running my hand over her back, I felt something sharp under her right shoulder blade. I choked on a breath as it came loose in my fingertips. "What's wrong?" Anya asked, pulling back slightly, frowning through the gloom. "Nothing," I lied, my voice tight. "Cramp, that's all. I'd better get up and stretch it out." I went down to the kitchen, shutting the door behind me. Looked down at what I was holding, a maple leaf. The first sign of what was growing inside Anya, and now surely in me too. I leaned against the counter and cried, like a little kid. Cried for the son I'd lost and the wife I was losing, and for myself dying without any idea how much time I had left. Until then, I hadn't truly understood how those consumed by the plants didn't feel it. How they remained ignorant until the growth visibly forced its way from under their skin. I'd convinced myself they must have known, only lied to themselves about the sensations. The symptoms of their bodies being invaded, their organs slowing, stopping. Now I understood. Now that I was aware of what was growing through my body, I could feel it. The fullness of that new organism. Its relentless development through my muscles, into the chambers of my brain. I felt it like another part of me, a parasitic twin. And I could see now how some of the infected succumbed. How they even imagined themselves becoming something new, something good. Anya would be one of those people. I knew it. She had changed since Luke had died, given up on what was left of life, because she'd lost hers with him. Maybe when she felt the maple close in over her heart, she'd go out into the backyard and stand with him. Let the things that had killed them both grow together, long after even their bones were dust. As I walked shakily back into the bedroom and lay down in the dark, I decided I wouldn't do the same. I had seen myself in the faces of those raging protesters on the news. I had already made myself familiar with the local backstreet vendors selling the chemicals. It's the ones they said could cure, even if I didn't quite believe it. One day soon, I'll inject myself and Anya with that product and wait for it to work on the enemies inside us. And if it does not, God, I'm sorry for it, but I'll burn the maple in the yard that's still eating the scraps of my son, and then my wife and I. The world is ending in forest fires. But I'd rather go out that way. Go out angry, still a husband, a father, still a man. It's a strange kind of justice, isn't it? When the enemy isn't a person you can confront, but an insidious, beautiful horror that reclaims what it believes is its own. My story isn't about victory in the traditional sense. It's about defiance. It's about refusing to go quietly into that good night, even when the night is filled with rustling leaves and the scent of damp earth. If this story resonated with that primal fear, that desperate need to fight back, smash that like button and tell us in the comments. What would you sacrifice to retain your humanity when nature itself turned monstrous? And of course, subscribe for more stories that will keep you awake at night.